Kia ora koutou, everyone. Welcome along to today's hui. Tēnā koe te whenua, tēnā koe te whare, tēnā kōrua, mana whenua, tōmutu, nai tū hureri, tēnā koutou, kone hira, o wai kirikiri, ngā mihi nui, karakia for today. Whakataka te hou ki te uru, whakataka te hou ki te tonga, kia mā kine ki uta, kia mā tara ki tai, e hi aki ana te atakura, he tio, he huka, he hohu, tihei, modi order. And the affirmation. Let us affirm today that we as councillors will work together to serve the citizens of Selwyn District, to always use our gifts of understanding and courage, common sense, wisdom and integrity in all our discussions, dealings and decisions so that we may solve problems effectively. May we always recognise each other's values and opinions, be fair-minded and ready to listen to each other's point of view. In our dealings with each other, let us always be open to the truth of others and ready to seek agreement, slow to take offence and always prepared to forgive. May we always work to enhance the well-being of the Selwyn District and its communities. We will. I have an apology from Deputy Mayor Malcolm Lyle for this meeting. I'll move that we accept that. Is there a seconder? Shane, thank you. All those in favour say aye. Anyone against? Declare it carried. There's been no identification of any extraordinary business. Does anyone have any conflicts of interest that they would like to raise that aren't captured on the register? No. If there are any that come to mind during the meeting, just raise them as they come about. There's no public forum today, and so we move to the confirmation of minutes. It's on page 5. This is from the meeting of the 28th of June. 2023. Can I have a move and a seconder that they are true and accurate record? Thank you, Phil. Seconder, Sophie, thank you. Is there any conversation on those minutes? All those in favour say aye. Anyone against? Declare it carried. We had the public forum presentations last time and note that there was a meeting held at Tōmutu on Monday of this week, and a report back to councillors will be presented through the Infrastructure Committee at its upcoming meeting. And there was 3 things on the items, action items, and those 3 things are for future meetings. None of that's been reported back today. So the first report is on page 48. And it's the Local Government New Zealand remits. This covers the items that will be voted on by members of LGNZ at the AGM on Wednesday next week. Circulated them as part of this agenda to get a view as to which way you would like council to support or otherwise each of these remits. There will be the opportunity for speakers to speak for and against these remits, and so the advice today is on what you would like voted on based on the information that we have, but I would seek the leniency of the room to think about if there's things that are raised that change what we know, that at the moment I'm the delegate and Malcolm is the alternate, that we have the ability to listen to the arguments in the room at the time and not be bound by what is said in the room today. The items that are here, we'll just move through each of them, and I'm really seeking a show of hands around your support or otherwise for where they sit, and we'll mark down whether we are as a council for or against each of the items. Does anybody have anything particular that they'd like to raise on any one of them, or are you happy that we just move through them and you raise them as we get to them? Okay, Deborah?
Sorry, my first query is that some of these remits are covered by some of the political events, policy-driven initiatives that have been released recently by either some of the parties that are standing for central government. So I just wonder, where do they sit with regards to adoption of a remit from local government?
This has no influence over what party or parties may decide to do or not do. This is influence over what LGNZ picks up as matters of advocacy to, some of it to central government, some of it for local government. So parties between now and the election will continue to make their own announcements. It'd be nice if those announcements match the things that local government wants to see happen, Deborah. Grant, did you have something general for the conversation or specific when we get into it? Okay, we'll do it as we come to it. And Elizabeth, you're happy if we just deal with it as we come to the matter? Okay, so the first one is the allocation of risk and liability in the building sector. Do we want to vote in favour or against, or is there any discussion on this particular remit? Can you just raise your hand if you want us to vote in favour of this remit? Thank you. We'll be voting in favour. The next one is on the rates rebate. And there's 4 items there that we raise the income threshold for rates rebate eligibility to enable more low and fixed income property owners to access the rebates. And there's 3 other items here. Was there any discussion on this that people wanted to have? Hands up if we support this. Great, thank you. It's carried. The next item is the roading transport maintenance funding. Is there any discussion on this? Raise a hand if we're. Sorry, Grant.
It's too late to do it addendums to these. It says read, isn't it? You know, the debate about additional roads, state highways, debate.
So I could raise an amendment to these things at the AGM. Yeah, I think because every council's got the same as what we've got in front of them. So to get an amendment across the line, it would require major consensus. Okay. Please raise your hand if you support us supporting the roading and transport maintenance funding remit. Okay, thank you. The next one is the local election accessibility, that LGNZ ensure local government elections are fully accessible. Raise your hand if you support this one. Great, let's pass. The next one is the ability for co-chairs at mayoral forums. Is there any discussion on this?
Yeah,
Phil.
can you just flesh that out a bit, Sam?
So I can only give you what's in the papers here. I know nothing more than what's on our agendas. So this is really about, it's proposed by a regional council for Northland. And so their view is that they would like to have co-chairs sit on the regional council. And at the moment, the legislation doesn't allow that ability. So this is requesting that LGNZ explores what that could look like. It doesn't say that it has to happen. It just says enable that where it's locally appropriate. Please raise your hand if you support that remit. Great. The next one is parking infringement penalties, proposed by Whangarei District Council, that LGNZ advocate to central government to enable councils to determine the penalties for parking infringements. Any more discussion on parking today? No joking. Please raise your hand if you support this remit. Great. Thank you. The next one is rural and regional public transport, proposed by the Waikato Regional Council. And this is about a major uplift in urban bus networks and also looking at rural communities and regional communities having an increased bus network or public transport network. Any discussion on this? Raise your hand if you support it. Great, thank you. Establishing a resolution service. This is asking that LGNZ investigate the creation of a resolution service that would nationally handle processes around complaints, fairness, protection and accountability within local government. Is there any conversation on that? Grant.
Where that fitted in with, the current methodology we have around Lagoima and the Ombudsman, and is that a substitute for that process, or because we have a process in place already? How are they suggesting that'll work?
So Lagoima doesn't. LGNZ is not covered by Lagoima as it's not a local authority. And so there's things that are outside of that fit within LGNZ. And if LGNZ was to do this, if I give an example of the current work that's gone on.
So sorry, I read this wrong. I anticipated it was actually council based. So this is solely restricted to LGNZ.
This is for LGNZ to pick up a resolution service that would then enable councils or councillors or individual elected members to seek support from an independent space of advice, that instead of needing to run through complaints, whether it's to the chief executive and the mayor, could actually go outside of their council and do that. At the moment it happens, but it happens in an ad hoc manner. And it's only there if you know where to go and ask for it. This would set it up for all elected.
I read that completely wrong. I thought it was ratepayers coming into compliance.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, I just misunderstood the remit completely.
Okay, cool. Any further questions on that? All those in favour that we support that, please raise your hands. Great, that's will be carried. Earthquake-prone buildings proposed by the Manawatu District Council. This is that LGNZ investigate and report to members on ways to help councils and communities that are struggling with the timeframes and earthquake-prone buildings, sections of the Building Act and council policies pertaining to building thoroughfares. Any conversation on that? I suppose I have one thing there. I feel like there's a responsibility to the public to understand how we bring buildings that are a risk to New Zealanders up to scratch. And for us in our district, there are a number of older buildings, although nothing compared to some of the towns in New Zealand that have been around for a lot longer. But I think what we have seen is through the Canterbury earthquakes is that buildings kill people. And actually there's a responsibility to try and do something. So I feel like delays in some of these timeframes, they might be helpful for a council, but I'm not sure they're great for a community. So I'd be interested in the views around the council table as to whether we should support this or not. Grant?
Same. I mean, I think it's just a case of councils that haven't been affected by earthquakes delaying the work program, and all of a sudden it's caught up on them. But it's too big an issue to leave, as we know.
Yeah, thank you. Elizabeth?
Yeah, I can see coming from Manawatu, they have a lot of heritage buildings and it's not a hugely affluent town. I think that a focus that they're producing is possibly bringing this to the attention that it's not financially viable either way for them to knock it down or to enforce it. So, yeah, I think this is an area that needs to be discussed at length and some solutions provided. And I think this is where this is going. Funding needs to be made available to retain some heritage properties. And that needs to be, we need to be able to help communities to advocate for that. I think also probably wholly I support the idea, but I think it just does need to be fleshed out a little bit in the hows and ways, and the ways in which they feel that they could really make this workable for everybody across the board.
Thank you. Sophie?
Yeah, happy to support this apart from the timeframes, but I don't know if there's a way of making it that the solution suggested doesn't involve extending timeframes. It's more around making, it's the education piece and this is where the funding is. And I don't know if that already exists. But yeah, giving another 10 years is not a good idea.
No. Okay, is there anyone further would like to comment on this? I'm not really in favour of trying to seek an amendment at the meeting to try and like the nuance around timeframes. I think we either support this or don't. And my view is that I don't think we should. I'm uncomfortable with the timeframes piece of the extension. Happy to take the view of the room though. Please raise your hand if you think we should support this remit. Okay, we won't be supporting it. KiwiSaver contributions for elected members. This is proposed by Hamilton City Council that LGNZ asks the government to amend the law to enable councils to make contributions to elected members' KiwiSaver scheme. Any discussion? Raise your hand if you support it. Great, we'll support that one. And the last one is the scope of audits and audit fees. Any discussion?
Sam, just yes. It only occurred to me, and I know but will that change the nature of our relationship and become employees rather than contractors? I mean, just simply adding KiwiSaver on, can it be done? I mean, is that part of the investigation, I suppose? But it would, to me, fundamentally change the relationship. You'd become an employee, wouldn't you?
Some of it is bringing it in line with the way that MPs are currently dealt with. So it's saying, is there a consistency about what elected members do and don't receive?
Oh.
Cool. So the scope of audit fees, any conversation on audit fees? All those in favour of supporting that remit, raise your hands. Anyone against? Great. Thank you for that clarification on the way that someone will vote at the AGM next week. That has us supporting everything except for earthquake-prone buildings. We received the local government and remits report for information and request the delegates to vote in line with today's discussion. Can I have a mover and seconder for that? Thank you, Bob, Shane. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Anyone against? Declare it carried. Move on to tab 8, page 86, the Chief Executive's report. Tim.
Thank you, Mayor Sam. Look, I'll take the report as read and I might just walk through a couple of the key parts of it. The first section is on the spatial plan and the consultation process. I've just had an update. We've got about 140 submissions currently, but most are actually in support of the spatial plan, which is good news. And I think it closes on the 23rd of July, so another week or so. The second part at number 2, this comes from the representation review subcommittee. There was a motion that was put to allow for 2 members of the Selwyn Youth Council to participate in this review committee. Both with speaking rights, but only one with voting rights. The reason for this is that this is quite a new thing, having youth council members here. We really welcome that engagement with youth and representation, but it is quite a daunting process for these young adults who are about 16 or 17, I suppose. And so they're both co-chairs of the youth council, and they just felt more comfortable and supported if they're both able to be here. So the subcommittee agrees with that, but to reflect that, we need to change the terms of reference, and that's attached to this report. And so looking for a resolution from this council to just confirm that we're comfortable with that change, and strong recommendation from the representation review committee that it does so. At number 3, the annual plan, I think we've heard about that, so I won't go into any detail. And then at number 4, we've got the review of local government, and we had a workshop around this, so I won't go through those parts in detail. I guess my only comment would be that I think one of the biggest challenges for local government is to get alignment across the sector to initiate some of these changes, because the government sends fairly clear signals that it's not going to do anything in the meantime, but it's encouraged local government to do so. There's some really good parts of that, but trying to get a forum or a platform in which to get coordination could be challenging. But I think there's some great stuff in there. I think there was general consensus around this table when we workshopped the issue a couple of weeks ago now. The Westview Special Fund is winding up, so that's been all allocated through the Melbourne Community Board. And then at number 6, I just had some amendments to the delegations manual just for you to confirm. I think that's about it. Happy to take questions.
Thank you, Tim. And I should have said at the start, thank you for the work that you've done as our interim chief executive since David left, and over the last 3 weeks before Sharon begins next week. It's great the way that you've continued to support staff and elected members through the decisions that we've had to make. So yeah, well done, and thank you.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Councillor, is there any questions that you have on that report? Nicole?
Questions more to, well, it's about the representation review, the extra 2 youth being on it. Has the subcommittee considered actually changing their meeting time so it's easier for the kids, for any representatives? I mean, assuming that the terms of reference updated is passed, but as so that the students actually find it easier to attend meetings?
Yeah, we didn't talk about it at their last meeting, but I have spoken to the Secretariat, and we're looking at 4:30, I believe.
4:30. Okay,
Yeah, so we have, yes.
Elizabeth?
So I wanted to ask about the citizens' assemblies, et cetera, et cetera. They're an appointed group of people, and you're going to be utilising the same people over and over again to feed back information from the community to us in council. I wanted to know, does this mean that puts paid to the community at large being able to do submissions on topics? Does that mean that side will be gone and we'll just simply be relying on the citizens' assemblies from here on in once it's
So
in
I'm not
progress?
sure, which part of the report are you referring to? Oh, this is the Future for Local Government?
Yeah.
It's just a series of recommendations that came out from that forum. So that is just a recommendation. It's a possibility. I think it probably has got some merit in terms of a different way of engaging, but it's not actually in play yet. It's just a recommendation that's yet to be implemented.
If it comes into play, will it be one of many tools, or will it fundamentally probably be the main tool that we use instead of submissions?
Others may have views, but I think it'll be just one of many.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Anything further on this, Shane?
Tēnā koe, e te koro matua, tēnā koe kai whakahaere. Tim, thank you very much. Just passing on Sam's comments, thanking him, and welcome everybody here. Just to follow on from the kōrero around representation review, I think well done proposing that, Councillor Glidden and yourself, Councillor Dean. supporting two members does allow for that awhi of our our youth members. It is quite a daunting process, and they express that as well. So I think supporting that, and I'm happy to move it, really shows the level of engagement that we have and the supportive nature of our district. So thank you very much, and happy to move it.
Thank you, Shane. Is there a seconder for this report then and the recommendations that are there? Yeah. Thank you, Lydia. Phil, you're the next speaker.
No, I guess that's probably answered my question. Actually, do we not need to move the representation committee stuff separately as a separate? Does it just encompass in this one?
It can all be part of the same recommendation, I think. Yep. Grant.
I just raised with Kelvin pre the meeting around the delegations manual. I think it's important to provide clarity that there is significant delegations within that policy, but they are specific to budgeted line items within our budget. So it's not expenditure, which is not unbudgeted. So that reverts there. But the second question for Kelvin, which I didn't raise, which I should have at the same time, was, will these delegations be part of the internal audit program for the new internal auditor that you're proposing?
Kelvin?
Yes, potentially. We're working through a program of internal audit. If it was part of the program, it would be compliance with the delegations policy. And just to add to that, we are looking at doing a comprehensive review of the delegations policy also to make sure it's still fit for purpose.
Thank you. Grant, do you have anything else?
That's right.
Sophie.
Yeah, I just wanted to note that, yes, there are a lot of delegations, but just to point out for anybody listening that the vast majority of them are literally just title changes because we've had a restructure. It's just updating to fit what actually exists now within the organisation.
Thanks, Sophie. Did you have something on that, Kelvin?
Yeah, just to add to delegations, the financial delegations which are held there are for your information only. The chief executive has the power to delegate in a sub-level down to their managers, which is within the CEO's delegation. So these are just for information.
Thank you. Elizabeth.
Oh, Calvin, this might be one for you, but just wanted to know the corridor manager, the road corridor planner, and the school road safety advisor. Are they just specific target areas that someone's going to be looking after? And what is a corridor manager anyway?
I'll answer that one. Thanks, Councillor Munt. As part of the organisation restructure, we looked at all the positions, and obviously, as you've seen, the delegations reflect the new title. The corridor manager looks after the road corridor. Their role is to look at activities fence to fence within the road corridor in terms of issues around not necessarily the pavement issue, but all the issues around the corridor, like access ways, any other thing that impacts on the actual roading network.
Thank you, Murray. Shane.
Just one more, and apologise for having a second bite of this, but I just wanted to thank Tim and your position for bringing us a chief executive report that reflects the changing times of our district, and by that the engagement that is needed, and it's reflected here in page leading change and system renewal, and to all the staff really, and new culture, mindsets and leadership approaches that are essential. I've identified that. I've been quite vocal about the need to engage all Māori who are living in the district, Pacifica and Asian. So I'm really excited about the next steps forward and the way that we engage, actually getting out there and doing it, and looking forward to that approach, and welcoming you also, Sharon, to part of that process. Thank you, Tim. Good luck.
Thank you, Shane. Deborah.
Thanks, Sam. I just wanted to follow on from Elizabeth's question and just remind everybody that with regards to the delegations manual and the policy manual, to understand where the restructuring is and who's responsible for what, we did ask prior to the previous chief executive that a list be sent out to all councillors from the departments to show the new positions that have been created. I don't think that has actually happened, and that would actually give us an understanding of why the new names and what their roles and responsibilities are. I'm looking forward to actually reviewing the delegations manual and the policy manual and bringing it back for all of us to workshop, so we all understand the new positions, what the policies are they still valid, and the setting of the delegation itself. So I think that will clarify a lot of the issues that we have with this restructuring. And I'd like to thank Murray Washington for actually sending out a copy of his department's new restructuring. So I hope, did everyone get that, or was it just Sophie and I? Sorry.
Yeah, Deborah, I think those were circulated. I remember receiving them. If they're not, then we'll check in through Tim.
What was circulated was our the group manager's direct reports and the function that they look after. I don't think it's appropriate to be sending a full organisation structure right down to the bottom. It's the key people that you'll need to make contact with, and that's why we kept it at that level.
Thanks, Carol.
I must have not received it because I don't recall receiving it.
We can go back through Deborah and I'll check what was sent and work with Tim and we'll resend it if required. Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we receive the Chief Executive's report, approve the terms of reference updated for the Representation Review Subcommittee, and approve the delegation additions and alterations to the delegations manual. But it's actually just receiving those. I guess is actually the language around that should be receiving the, or do we need to approve them? If it's not actually for us, it's a delegation under the Chief Executive. We can have it there as approved because we're approving it, but let's think about that language next time it comes around. All those in favour say aye. Anyone against? Declare it carried. Tab 9 is on page 104. It's the approval to grant easement pursuant to Section 48 of the Reserves Act 1977, Auckland Park, Rolleston. You'll move that, Deborah. Seconder. Thanks, Grant. Is there any discussion on that? All those in favour say aye. Anyone against? Declare it carried. Item tab 10 is on page 109, and this is the authority to grant a variation of lease over Recreation Reserve Foster Park, Rolleston. Moved by Grant. Seconder, Bob. Is there any discussion on this? Yes. Deborah and Nicole.
Thank you. My discussion on this, I guess, is this setting a precedent for other clubs on other reserves to actually put, I guess it's a portable building to store their gear, because I happen to know on a lot of rural reserves that actually does happen. They're stored in containers or sheds that are associated with their sport, and I just wonder what's the management system going forward with regards to the leases for other reserves that we actually have. And is this the first one?
It's Bianca and she's gone home. El, Murray, you got any background?
Murray, can you come to the front table and just, it's easy for everyone to see.
Yeah, thank you, Sam. Bianca's not well this afternoon, and we got advised late this morning that she wouldn't be available. Rob is also quite unwell. So as I signed off the report, I just commented my understanding that the ability to provide a variation to lease to allow for a shed to be built was considered by staff to be within the activities of the Foster Park Reserve Management Plan. So it wasn't going to set a precedent. It was in line with the current objectives. And of course, as you've known from previous discussions, where we have had an activity or a request to do things outside of that, we have declined it. So I think the concern is case by case. And in this case, it fits in with what the use of Foster Park is.
Thank you.
My understanding is not quite like that, Murray. I spoke to a staff member earlier the week because this is outside what we would normally do at Foster Parks. John Reid specifically had an area where these storage of things is to be, which is around by where the men's shed is. Now, it's not far from where this building is, but there is a piece of land beside where rugby has got their building, where was potentially in the future that could be used as an extension of the building, which apparently they are not going to do. So then a compromise was that they could have the shed there. I'm just concerned that it might be a precedent set, as Deborah's just asked the question. And yeah, with the whole, this is a premier park and the whole look matters as well as to what it is. This is on the edge of the park on the Dines Road end. So I can't understand why it cannot be in the area where they're talking about where the containers are.
Any other, oh, Elizabeth, sorry. We'll come back to that, Nicole. I'm not trying to close it off. Let's just go around and see if there's other views.
Shane's next.
Thank you.
Shane? Yep.
Yeah, kia ora, Sam. I guess mine's less about setting precedent and building fit for purpose. And as you can see from here, the storage containers are sitting in the changing rooms, and whether that's a permitted activity or not, I think we need to ensure that future facilities actually are built fit for purpose. I'm not saying that they currently aren't, but we look to the likes of Leaston and development there. We would hate for something like this to happen and then stall sports due to that. Thank you.
Thanks, Shane. Elizabeth?
So on the back of everyone else's comments, I just want to, in a similar vein, say that it would be good to actually have quite a developed plan for this, because if, as it was pointed out by Deborah, if we set a precedent, ideally there'll be other teams also that would want somewhere to store their stuff and other sports, because we facilitate quite a lot of different sports. And if we do that, would we not be better served to actually build something and create facilities, storage facilities for multiple different sports?
Murray?
Yeah, like haven't been privy to any other discussions during the week, so I can't comment on some of those. But Foster Park is a significantly sized facility. The sports are well apart, and I think trying to put them all in one place would be a challenge. There is a developed plan for this area on page 88, but this is all part of the overall Foster Park plan that Phil Miller keeps updating and reviewing. So I understand the comments. It's quite away from the street front. It is on a bit of what's currently green space, but I'm just going to support the officers who actually manage the park, saying that they don't have any problem with.
I was just going to say, I mean, just reading the report, it seems like it's the best option in terms of keeping the park tidy. If you don't go down that option, then they'll find somewhere to store it, and probably what in a less preferable area. And secondly, I guess, look, the whole of Rollaston's grown enormously. We need to be flexible and adapt in terms of how we deal with these issues going forward. And this seems to me, and I'd go with the recommendation of the council officer who's obviously been involved with it and has come up with a recommendation as the best option. That would be this morning.
Could I add a comment about being planning ahead, remembering this was a relocated facility. It was relocated plus the addition of new toilet blocks, and this just reflects the growth and activity of sporting in Foster Park and Selwyn in general. We will never get it absolutely right, and we will need to add on at times as these facilities are more highly utilised.
Thanks, Barry. Sophie and then Phil.
Yeah, I wish this wasn't a request, but at the same time, I definitely support the there's the mention of basically being able to store equipment closer to the facility will reduce the risk of people driving backwards and forwards from somewhere else. And while I don't like the idea of a shed on that nice piece of wheatgrass, at the same time, I dislike the idea of somebody travelling backwards and forwards, storing stuff in cars and houses and whatnot. I just like that more. So I'll support it. Happy to second or move.
Thank you, Sophie. Phil.
Yeah, I'm speaking to support the recommendation as well. Notwithstanding what my fellow councillors have said, I think on a time by time case, we can consider things a lot like this, but I speak in support of the recommendation.
Thanks, Phil. Is there anyone else to add other views I want to make known? Grant, you moved it. Bob seconded. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Anyone against? Declare it carried. Thank you, Murray. The next item is the resolution to exclude the public from the meeting. So mover and seconder for that, Phil and Grant. All those in favour say aye. Anyone against? Declare it carried. We'll just wait for the live stream to end